Hello! Before we start off, I'd like to ask you all a little trivia question about the history of the Jackbox Survey Scramble. It should be a pretty simple one. Alright, here goes. When were game modes DARES and Dash added to the Jackbox Survey Scramble? Is it A, the 14th of October 2024, the release date of the Jackbox Survey Scramble demo? B, the 24th of October 2024, the release date of the Jackbox Survey Scramble? Or C, the 13th of December 2024, the release date of the appropriately named Dash and DARES update? If you answered C, congratulations, you are 100% completely wrong. You're wrong. Why are you wrong? Well, for one, it makes for a more engaging intro, and two, because of the existence of the hidden beta game modes, there's actually always been 8 game modes in the full release of the Jackbox Survey Scramble, even before the Dash and DARES update. The difference on launch was that DARES and Dash took the form of beta game modes, inaccessible to the average consumer, but playable with some light JBG config modification, where DARES used to look like this, and Dash used to look like this. But since the release of the Dash and DARES update, there didn't seem to be a need to leave their beta counterparts lying around anymore. And so, in favor of their full releases, the beta versions of DARES and Dash were removed from the Jackbox Survey Scramble, running the risk of becoming lost media. That is, until I stepped in. That's right, I've successfully ported the official betas of DARES and Dash into the current version of the Jackbox Survey Scramble, and added them in as entirely separate game modes, meaning you can play the old versions of these modes right from the lobby, and come back to play their full versions on the flick of a dime. Wanna look back on an older version of DARES with a wildly different scoring system? Go right ahead. Half the UI will be missing, but hey, it's historic. Wanna go back to a version of DARES with a complete UI? Not a problem. Wanna play a more primitive version of Dash with no sabotages and some hilarious programmer horse art? Hell yeah you do. Wanna go back to UFOs and portals? Sure thing. Oh, and another thing, this old version of Dash, I've made it actually playable. For context, on launch when these beta modes came out, the controller data for Dash wasn't complete, and as a result, made it impossible to see anything on your controller or interact with the game in any meaningful way. This meant that you had to mod controller functionality back into the game to actually make it playable. And considering this fact, as well as the general unpopularity of the Jackbox Survey Scramble as a whole, very few people got to actually experience this beta game mode as the interactive experience it was meant to be. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if my livestream of all the beta game modes on launch was the only surviving footage of functional gameplay from the beta version of Dash. But now, with my released port of these game modes, anyone can play the old version of Dash the way it was once intended. But being the restorationist I am, I've also added a setting just for this beta version of Dash that literally just makes it unplayable on the controller, the way many of you would have experienced on launch. I mean, the data it sends to the controller isn't quite the same, but that's just extremely pedantic, even for my standards. But that's a setting for you if you either love the preservation of history, or you're just a masochist. Okay, so how about a couple questions? Firstly, where can I get this port? Simple, I've released this beta port mod as an addition to my already existing mod for the Jackbox Survey Scramble, Local Mode. This mod pack adds an all-new local mode that acts as a framework for modders to create their own Survey Scramble category content through locally based lists focusing on trivia, statistics, opinions, or anything else. This creates a space for modders to create and play with fully custom categories without polluting Jackbox's servers with data they can't use. This mod pack also adds a couple extra settings that allow you to access more categories and interact with list data in different ways. And now this mod also restores 2 once lost beta game modes back into the game. What fun! Secondly, why did you do this? Well, quite simply, I really wanted to preserve this extra piece of Jackbox history. Look, it's not often that we get to see a prototype version of a Jackbox game, let alone one that we get to tinker around with ourselves and do our own experimenting with. It makes for a really interactive time capsule of what the game once was, in close vicinity to what it would become a couple game modes over. And I think having a space to quickly compare and contrast both versions of each game mode is really cool. When the Dash and DARES update eventually came out, one of the video ideas I had floating around in my head was an in-depth comparison video of the differences and quirks of each version of DARES and Dash to honor their previous beta status. I had actually started scripting, but I quickly shifted my gaze to the list downloading system once the 5th of June update came out, as I felt that it was both more important to talk about and more interesting. I would continue to work on it, but 2 big Survey Scramble video essays in a row? That sounds a bit repetitive to me. So I'll spare you the exhaustion. And there you have it. That's everything for today. I just wanted to show this off and bring these old versions of DARES and Dash back into the light. This port is definitely more for curiosity's sake and for historical preservation purposes, but in full honesty, I really appreciate the simplicity of the beta version of Dash specifically, and I'd happily revisit it just to see these poorly drawn horses again. If you want to download these ports for yourself, as well as the other mods I've made for this game, take a look at my GitHub or use the link in the description. But that'll be all from me. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, hit the bell, all those YouTube buzzwords. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you on the flip side. See ya!